Welcome to ESVN, the Emma Sports Vigeland Network show. My name is Emma Vigeland, and you know what to do, folks. Subscribe, youtube.com/ESVN show. Put on push notifications so you know when we're going live and when, I'm off the week before and we skip a week. Rate us 5 stars wherever you're listening to or watching this. And if you're watching live, like that stream. It helps with engagement. Comment and let us know what you thought of the show after the stream. Say hello to Bradley Alsop.
Hello, everyone. We have some housekeeping to get square away up front. Emma, before the show began, she requested a trade from the show to another media outlet, and she will not be getting traded. And until she relents on her desires to be traded and actually reports back to the studio for mandatory sessions and re-education for the majority report in ESVN universe, she will be incurring fines and wage garnishments until that concludes. So I wanted everyone to know what's going on here. We're a transparent, honest broker in the sports media ecosystem, and I can't let you off the hook for this, Emma.
This garnishing of my wages and penalty might be the kind of thing that makes me less inclined to say re-sign my contract with said entity.
Well, listen, a deal is a deal, and it's not about being happy where you work. It's about working where you work,
for the
ladies
Jets.
And gentlemen.
For people that don't know, Bradley is commiserating about Hassan Reddick, who was just traded a few months ago from the Eagles to the Jets, requesting a trade, and then the Jets crapping all over him on social media.
Requesting a trade without having played a snap for the team.
Well, because the problem is that the Jets should have had a contract in place when they traded for him. That's usually what happens when a player is traded from another team because they're having a contract dispute. The team that's acquiring said player is supposed to feel comfortable with the contract that is being at least floated by that agent. We'll get to that in just a second.
All gas, no breaks, baby.
Let's start off on the Olympics, though, because we had very little of the Olympics in our last episode to comment on, but we ended with such a flourish for the Olympics, with both U.S. basketball teams, the women and the men's, winning gold. Let's start with the men's. The U.S. men's basketball team has won its 5th straight Olympic gold, 98-87 over France. Although, much of the game was closer than that, but the women's was the closest. It still never felt like France was going to win because they had the clutch factor of Steph Curry, who made 4 3-pointers in the fourth quarter in the final 2 minutes that honestly each was more miraculous than the last. And the dagger was when we got this shot of him running up and up the floor. And this is going to be, I think, one of the images that's in history books here. Night, night, he says, Steph Curry, as he runs to the other side of the floor after hitting he was double teamed, falling away, completely looks like a brick if anybody else is shooting it. But the greatest shooter of all time in basketball hits that shot. 4 3-pointers in the final 2-minute stretch. He had 9 3-pointers in the semifinal, and he had 36 points in that semifinal. He was 8 for 12 behind the arc in this final. LeBron James had a phenomenal start to the game. He ended up being named Olympics MVP. In this game, he scored 14 points, had 6 rebounds, 10 assists. Kevin Durant also played quite well. He's now the first male American basketball player to win 4 gold medals. He had 15 points, and he had a beautiful feed, I should say, to Anthony Edwards later in the game in a 2v1 fast break, where he basically threw it up for Ant, and he knocked it down, which, Anthony Edwards plays with such infectious energy, and him saying in the playoffs that KD was his hero, it made me smile seeing him get that feed from Durant. Your thoughts, though, Bradley, I guess, on that final.
Well, a number of reasons why I appreciate this Steph Curry moment is that um, I'll somehow, some way, despite not being on the team and not being a presence on the floor for the Olympics, Draymond Green still somehow manages to insert himself in
Oh,
a
that's
moment,
Draymond there?
in a moment of greatness for Steph Curry.
Did you see Carmelo? I mean,
Yes, and Melo was
just
there. You had
amazing.
No, there was definitely there was a number of luminaries. Pau Gasol was there as well.
Yes.
Yeah, what's taking the game. And also there was a picture of what you were describing, the double team that Steph incurred when he was about to take that shot. And someone, I don't remember who tweeted this, but somebody basically said he is the only person on earth that could see Kevin Durant and LeBron James wide open, and it would actually be explicable for him to not kick out and pass the ball out of that situation, because he is the only person who can make that type of shot. Right. So it's an incredible run, but it's an incredible run for the men's team, but for the women's team too. The fact that it's been 8 straight gold medals for the women's team is a remarkable achievement.
Since the 90s.
Yeah, since the 1990s, especially when the WNBA was more in its nascent and kind of a fledgling era, where it was kind of rising to the level of a more kind of legitimate and reputable and kind of lived in sports league, and kind of an institution for women's basketball. It's so obviously has changed so much in the course of the last 28 to 30 years that since the first gold medal of this run for the women's national team. But it just shows a lot. It just shows, I think, this Olympics on both for the U.S., but also the entire pool, has shown that the U.S. has sort of made, since even the Dream Team, but since, frankly, the 1980s, that the NBA and basketball in America has become a cultural institution and a sports institution, like baseball was at some point for the United States, where the export of American basketball has made it so that not just it shows the dominance of the players in the U.S., but it also shows how internationalized the game is, with how competitive and how many NBA players and close to NBA players and college players were dotted around almost every single team that was competitive in this Olympics.
Well, I think you're right. I mean, there's still a ways to go, but my fiance made this point when we were watching the game. He was like, if 80 doesn't come back for the Olympics in 2028, who's going to be the other big man for the Americans? And I was like, who will be the other big man? Because all the big men seem to be like, Wembanyama is going to be older. And for France, they're going to have Gobert and Wembanyama again, but Wemby will be like probably heavier, and he'll be 24 at that point. Like, who is Giannis? Of course, is going to be playing. Although it not necessarily, that doesn't count, but for Greece. It's just going to keep getting better is the long and the short of it, I think, for the other teams
100%,
internationally.
yeah, absolutely.
Serbia ended up getting the bronze. France obviously got the silver, but the United States defeated Serbia, even though it looked like they could have lost.
Which also goes to show
final game.
That's exactly
Curry went off again.
Right, and that was partially what I was thinking, which is like, even seeing some of these games where Serbia was up double digits at some point, only for the U.S. to come back and win. I mean, the reason that was such a challenging matchup is because you had the best player in the world coming from Serbia in Nikola Jokic, and Bogdan Bogdanovic, who, in the 30-team landscape in the NBA, is maybe not necessarily the lights out shooter that you think of when you think of that type of accurate shooting. But in this one-on-one matchup, he was schemed up to just basically kind of take advantage of what was there before him and just and kind of insulate Jokic with another scoring option that otherwise probably in another iteration of this team, even if Jokic was there, the fact that even like Serbia has a few other NBA players to fill out their Olympic roster, I think it just goes to show how the real growth of the game, and even in the sense of, it almost seemed fluky at the beginning that South Sudan was competitive with the United States in an Olympic basketball matchup. But even the fact of a country that was founded or splintered off of Sudan proper and became its own nation in like 2011, like a nation that is literally as old as some like middle schoolers, has a fringe NBA player in Wenyen Gabriel who went to the University of Kentucky, was on the Lakers for a time, playing for them. It's like this game has reached every corner of the earth. It's remarkable to even just consider that the fact that it has gone to places that maybe no one, especially I would say, whatever James Naismith believed when he was, shooting balls into peach baskets or whatever it was in Georgia, whatever the story, the potentially apocryphal story is, that it's truly globalized in a way that I think is really amazing to see on the world stage.
Oh, it really is, and it's just going to keep getting better, as we're saying. I want to also be fair to the United States to a degree, where a lot of these teams where they don't have a lot of NBA players on their rosters, they're playing and practicing for like a year or longer in the lead up to these games, and the United States is like, let's just come together, for 2 months, and we'll sort of practice, and Steve Kerr will bring it all together, because in the end, like, all these other teams that were giving the United States men's team were playing really fundamentally sound. They were hustling defensively, but there is a size factor that the United States could go big when they really wanted to. And then they had the greatest shooter in the history of basketball on their side. And what made the difference in the semifinal against Serbia and in the final against France? 3-point shooting, lights out. And it was that Curry connection from a coaching and, like, I think, personnel perspective, where Kerr was like, I'm going to make sure that the ball is in his hands with an opportunity to close it out at the end of this game. And he did. And what was great about it, too, was, like, as a Boston Celtics hater, and also as a, someone who was not thrilled that Tyrese Halliburton got the spot over one Jalen Brunson, neither of those guys made significant contributions in this run. So,
well, I credit Tyrese for at least having a sense of humor about it. I
don't credit him for that. Okay.
Whereas Tatum, I'm sure Tatum was legitimately pissed off that he's
right,
not
but
getting
I'd rather
the respect.
have that guy on my team. Tyrese Halliburton, like, he's not beating the soft allegations by making a little bit of a joke about how he wasn't on. Like, do you think Kobe would have been laughing his ass off if he didn't see the floor for the U.S.?
Yeah, but Kobe's who's doing a lot of other things too.
You're right. Fair enough. I just think it's like a little bit of he's just not helping himself by, I think, like, being so happy-go-lucky about competition. That's
he's
all
a little
I'm saying.
SpongeBob-esque.
A little bit SpongeBob-esque, but yeah. What was that stupid take that we saw in the lead up to this by Bill?
Bill
Bill Simmons. He was just saying how LeBron shouldn't be the one who's captaining this team. It should be Jason Tatum, and he barely saw the floor.
Just world historical homerism.
He's just unbelievable.
LeBron James should not be the standard bearer for the United States national team.
And I also think there was just smart. They were smart in the way that they built the team and they constructed the roster too. Like Holiday being the point guard that they had out there oftentimes to start the game, the fact that he had some of the defense that they could lean on, and Anthony Davis was used really strategically. It just makes sense. Steve Kerr is phenomenal. It seems like he's going to be retiring from the U.S. Gold medal, or like U.S. men's national team coaching, and that the heir apparent appears to be Eric Spoelstra, which would be awesome as well.
Which I think makes it's I think it's been very, the chain of the kind of line of succession, I think, has been very kind of well executed, just because I honestly feel like it has sort of gone from the line. I feel like it's the line of succession. I feel like is sort of basically established, like the best American coach, basically, that you could kind of hand the coach of the year type designation to every year, despite whatever context those coaches are in. Went from Greg Popovich to Steve Kerr to now Eric Spoelstra. It just makes sense to me in terms of, like, these are, to me, the
passing of the Olympic torch, almost literally.
Yeah, right. In the sense that these are the coaches that, in my mind, have exemplified, like, on the sidelines, like the kind of quality of coaching, but also just like the kind of different manifestations of basketball in the NBA from from the dynastic Spurs to the dynastic Warriors, and what Spoelstra has done, honestly, almost in combination with having the super team Heat, while also getting to the finals with a more scrappy unit that just kind of really embraced so-called hashtag Heat culture. You know what I mean? So it's awesome to see Spoelstra, who I think sometimes, honestly, even for how phenomenal of a coach he is and how how impressively his teams have acquitted themselves, despite for example, even when they got to the finals against the Nuggets being an 8th seed, it's nice to see him eventually be rewarded for that, because I think he'll do a great job as that going forward.
100%. You mentioned the women's team, but yes, the women's basketball team has won their 8th consecutive gold medal back to 96. That was the first time that they had this. So, I was born in 1994. Bradley, were you born in 1996, right? Okay, yes. So there you go. So for every year that Bradley has been alive, and when's your birthday? It's in the winter, right?
It's February, yeah.
Okay, so you were born every year. Well, I guess you had a few months before the women were the gold medalists, okay? But for the most part, your entire life,
happy.
You were not happy during that time period. You cried the entire time. Women's basketball has
Where's Lisa Leslie?
They have not won a gold medal yet. Now they have. They won 67 to 66, and this was actually felt much more legitimately close than
this
men's game, which I always felt like, okay, eventually they're going to put it away or whatever. Yeah, it was a nail biter. And Gabby Williams really led the charge for France. She's a former Husky, part of that UConn team. She was drafted by the Chicago Sparks, but she ended up playing in Europe. I don't know, she looked pretty great. I don't really know the circumstances of why she's in Europe, but maybe it's closer to, she has a French mom, but she grew up in America. I don't know. It could be a pay thing. I would hope that maybe she gets some WNBA clout if she chooses to return to the WNBA. Not sure how those contracts work, but regardless, she really balled out, and she banked in a 2 floater at the end where I was like, holy crap. Did the defender, I forget who it was, graze her arm? And then it could have tied it up. Because it was a buzzer beater too, and they ended up still losing by 1 point. And the United States, though, this was just a much closer game than they had dealt with so far in Paris in the Olympics. The average margin of victory for their previous games was 18.6 points. They lost by 1, so that tells you everything. And on the American side, I mean, Asia Wilson is still the best player in the world. She didn't have the best start, though, because the defense by France was really scrappy. They were really physical early on. In the end, though, she still had a double-double, 21 points, 13 rebounds, 4 blocks.
All in a day's work.
All in a day's work. But Breanna Stewart also struggled early, too. And then in the end, though, she came up really clutch defensively, as I mentioned. I think, she contorted her body, and she just had this length to disrupt a shot that could have put France in a better position really early on, or really late in the fourth. And Kelsey Plum also had a pair of clutch free throws to clinch the game. And the Americans just had the depth and the size to be able to rotate players in. Jackie Young, she fouled out. They were still able to maintain themselves because of, again, just the depth that they have, specifically at the guard position, and the size advantage that they have with that depth. So just phenomenal stuff. I mean, what can we say at this point?
Well, the only thing that was missing was Caitlin
Clark. Yeah, I know.
I don't know if they. I guess maybe there's another medal besides gold that they could have won if Caitlin Clark was on the team. I don't know.
She will be phenomenal to watch in Los Angeles in 2028.
Yeah, I mean, bank on it. Her, Angel Reese, Camila Cardozo.
Oh, my God.
There's Cameron Brink. Talk about the pipeline. You were saying who might be the big that replaces Anthony Davis. There is a storm coming.
Oh my gosh!
Incredible. Aaliyah Edwards. There are just an incredible amount of extremely young incredible basketball players for the in the WNBA who are going to be on the USA team in 4 years.
Although, like, watch like them have some sort of fluke horrible game, and like Caitlin Clark loses to I don't know.
They lose to Luxembourg.
Yeah, no, but like, what would trigger the right that has made her an avatar again against her will for their racist project? What would they hate the most?
Like Somalia,
yeah,
or like
Cameroon comes and defeats the United States.
some anonymous, to these people anonymous African country that represents the sum total of all of their nightmares and projections.
Yeah, I mean, that's actually a pretty good way for us to transition into the Imane Khelif story, because there's a lot of racism mixed into this story as well. It makes me sad, to be honest with you. Even though Imane Khelif did win the gold, she was subjected to some of the most disgusting harassment by the worst people on this earth. Elon Musk and every right-wing transvestigator and commentator decided to attack Imane Khelif, who ended up winning the gold, as I mentioned, but was basically subjected to a global cyberbullying campaign by right-wingers and TERFs. And this really all comes down to the fact that Imane Khelif is strong and for her weight class, right? She's dominant in many ways, although in the Tokyo Games, I think she lost to just to somebody else, and she didn't end up winning that game. But there was a International Boxing Association disqualification that these bigots have hung their hats on. Now, they chose to disqualify another Olympian, Li Yuting of Taiwan, from last year's World Championships, her and Khelif, based on claims that they failed an eligibility test to prove their femininity, and they claimed, without evidence, that there were tests that showed that she had XY chromosomes. It is still possible, by the way, to have XY chromosomes and be biologically female. She is biologically female. She has a uterus. The idea that we have to talk about this is insane, but she has female genitalia, but not female enough for the likes of J.K. Rowling. This is what she had to say on social media, kicking off this mass bullying campaign for an Olympic athlete. Didn't hear too much about the person who was convicted of being a predator against children from J.K. Rowling, but apparently that was not high on her priority list. It was more policing this particular competitor's femininity. She says, "Could any picture sum up our new men's rights movement better? The smirk of a male who knows he's protected by a misogynist sporting establishment, enjoying the distress of a woman he's just punched in the head and whose life ambition he's just shattered." Now, this is a photo of the Italian boxer there who fell to the ground and started crying hysterically, and kind of fed into this campaign of disgusting transphobia, misogyny, and racism directed at Imane Khelif. She ended up apologizing later, but that was the thing. She portrayed herself as this victim. That's what kicked off this attack on Imane Khelif. Now, this is what she had to say after she won the gold. A lot of people were rooting for her because of this. But, I want to get into some of the intersectional elements of how femininity is policed very differently for people who are not white. She's from Algeria, someone who is of Middle Eastern descent. I'm going to read, though, over her the subtitles here in her press conference following her gold medal victory. Well, first and foremost, the Olympics are a dream. They are a dream for every athlete. I participated in Tokyo, but I was not well prepared at the time. It was during COVID, so times were difficult. But here in Paris, everybody in Algeria and across the Arab world knows how hard I have been working for this. I have been training in the United States, mostly in preparation for the Olympics, with an incredible trainer, Pedro Diaz.
دياز اللي عنده
He has 21
21
Olympic
ميدالية
medals,
أولمبية.
but
اليوم
today
عنده
he now has
22
22 Olympic
ميدالية
medals. He
ذهبية
deserves my
أولمبية.
medal as much as
هذا
I
الشيء
do.
اللي يبين
As to the
كيفية
question of
تطور
whether I
خليج إيمان.
qualify or not,
أما
whether I am a
عن
woman or not,
أهليتي
I have made
أظن
many
أنني
statements to the media
صرحت
saying that I
في
fully
وسائل
qualify to take
الإعلام
part
من
in this
قبل.
competition.
أهليتي تسمح لي بالمشاركة. أنا أنثى ككل البنات. ولدت أنثى.
I am a
وعشت
woman
أنثى
like any
ودرست
other
أنثى
woman.
ومارست الرياضة
I've lived as a
كأنثى.
woman, I compete
هذا
as a
الشيء لا
woman.
شك
There's
فيه.
no doubt about
أكيد
that.
هنالك
There are enemies of
أعداء
success, that's
النجاح.
what I call them.
أنا أسميهم أعداء النجاح لأنه كون ما يكونش أعداء
They are
النجاح
just enemies of
يكون
success
طعم الفوز ما يكونش عنده
and just gives my gold
ذوق
medal an
خاص.
extra special
ولكن
taste
كيكونوا
because
أعداء
of their
النجاح
attacks.
يكون الفوز بذو طعم خاص. شكرا لك. أكيد طبيعة الحال.
Yes, my
أظن
honor is
أنني
intact now.
استعدت شرفي.
The attacks I saw on
ولكن
social media were
الأشياء
extremely bad, but they
اللي
are
قاموا
meaningless.
بها في مواقع التواصل الاجتماعي هي أشياء تخل بالحياء. أشياء ما
They can
عندهاش
impact the
معنى،
dignity of
ما
people,
تمس
but I now
كرامة
hope people's thinking has
الناس.
changed.
تقدر حتى تغير ذهن وتفكير العالم. الحمد لله أنا قدرت نتجاوز.
As for the IBA, I have been in boxing under the umbrella of the International Boxing Association since 2018.
2018 وأنا أمارس الملاكمة مع الاتحاد الدولي للملاكمة إيبيا. هذا
They know me very well. They know what I am capable of.
كيفاش كنت
They know how I have developed over the
وليت.
years.
أنا ما نسمعش لهذا.
But now they are not
الاتحاد
recognized anymore,
غير
and now they
معترف
hate me.
به. هنالك
I don't know
عديد من
why. I really
الأشخاص
don't.
يكرهونني لا أعلم السبب. ولكن أنا اليوم
I have sent them a single message with this gold medal,
رسلت لهم رسالة واحدة هي الميدالية الذهبية.
showing that my
أقول لهم
dignity and my
شرفي فوق
honor
كل
is
شيء.
above everything else. So, loved that. And, you know, she mentioned there how she made it to the quarterfinals in the 2020 Olympics. She was defeated. No one seemed to care about that at all. She'd been boxing internationally for years and years and years without any incident. And as a reminder, Algeria doesn't recognize trans identity, so it would have been very difficult for her to legally have a passport that identified her as female and all of the relevant documentation in Algeria for if she was really pulling a fast one here. But I just gotta say this about J.K. Rowling. Can you go back to her actual Twitter here? I want to go to her bio. Go to her bio. Because this is the thing, is that TERFs are the real misogynists in this instance. J.K. Rowling has dedicated her life as a billionaire now to hating on trans people. In her bio here, she has writer sometimes known as Robert Galbraith.
What?
So you have a male pseudonym? Look, I'm not going to go as far as to say that she's a closet case. I wouldn't do such a thing like that. But I do think that her fixation on this issue seems to be rooted in some real emotional pain. And there are a lot of people who have healthier relationships with themselves that don't engage in this kind of thing. So I'll talk to her really quickly. Now, you, J.K. Rowling, are a female misogynist. You are a woman who is also a misogynist. You call yourself a trans exclusionary radical feminist, when in reality, you've decided to make it your life's mission as a billionaire, as I mentioned earlier, to police other women's femininity. And that often falls along very racist lines, classist lines, lines that really just enforce patriarchy at the end of the day. Because once you've decided that there is a kind of finite amount of I guess, femininity, maybe not finite amount, it's not the right word to describe it as, but once you've decided that there is an explicit category of femininity and there's an explicit category of masculinity, and it's determined by what you've decided it is, then eventually somebody is going to be falling in the gray area, and you're going to have to make a determination. And it could be wrong, as was the case here, although she's not doubling down. Because TERFs, when you try to enforce some sort of natural femininity or masculinity or whatever the case is, you end up just reinforcing patriarchal dominant notions of those gender roles. that's how this works. You know, when men's rights activists talk about traditional masculinity, all they do is they're not like, you know, men's rights activists in earnest. They're just there to reinforce gender roles. And she's doing the exact same thing. And at the end of the day, particularly as it relates to women, men and patriarchy have been trying to decide who is feminine and who is worthy of being called feminine for many, many years. And it's usually if you're docile, if you're white, if your sexuality is more traditional. And she doesn't even reconcile the fact that those are the exact tropes that she's engaging with. But she calls it feminism. It's incredibly inverted. And so anyway, Imane, I was so happy to see her have that victory. I hope she sues. She's actually filed a legal complaint in Paris, and I don't know what the standing would be. But
I hope she speaks with a defamation attorney.
Oh yeah, because I mean, look, in the UK, those laws aren't as it's not as high of a bar as it is in the United States. Now, it's difficult because of the nature of like the laws surrounding online posting and where is the jurisdiction, and she was competing in Paris, and I don't know wherever the hell J.K. Rowling was tweeting from, some, you know, bunker with genitalia sculptures all over the place in London or whatever vacation home she goes to. I don't know. So it would be difficult to prove. But there's other people. I mean, Elon Musk, every right-wing influencer was on top of this as well. And yeah, eventually this transvestigation panic was going to harm cis women as well. And Imane Khelif handled it with complete grace. And this is why none of this should happen. If she's any woman, trans woman, cis woman, any woman gets to compete regardless. It's not about, you know, the end result of the politics of someone like J.K. Rowling is this. Allow the very few trans women that have the ability to get to that high of a level to compete in the sport with the gender they have chosen. Full stop. That's the end of this conversation. Any thoughts?
Well, I really find it amazing that, well, first of all, bottom line, beyond my ironic observation, is that this is just kind of the inevitable endpoint for the trans panic on the right, which is just fundamentally, our colleague Brandon Sutton has said this a lot, which is I think is exactly right, is that these people don't give a shit about women's sports. What they care about is having another avenue that is a little bit more strategic and potentially less costly to them from an optics standpoint to police women's behavior. So by making it so that there is a panic around trans people participating in sports, if there is a so-called edge case, it wasn't an edge case because Imane Khelif, even if she wanted to be trans or transition, which she hasn't and didn't, she wouldn't be allowed to because it's illegal in Algeria.
Yeah.
And but if you would call this an edge case, which they probably would call it an edge case to at least be like, it's a slippery slope. It's just boiling down to the fact that any woman that doesn't comport with their standards of women should not have the same rights as those women that comport to those standards. Any woman that doesn't resemble Tommy Lauren should not be able to participate in sports and should not have the same rights as other women. And because the failure of imagination and creativity and the failure to actually understand the people that walk this earth makes it so that a woman that resembles Riley Gaines or Shannon Bream or Sandra Smith or Martha McCallum, you could even think I'm making up some of these names. I'm not. They're all white blonde women on Fox News. That's the standard.
Yeah.
And you know what that is also? It's subjective. That's not science either.
It's not, but they pretend it because what right-wing thought is it's about like essentializing or naturalizing existing hierarchies and pretending
exactly.
that they always have existed. There used to not be integration in baseball.
Right. But all of a sudden...
Yeah.
The natural order of things knocked over.
Exactly. Wasn't it the natural order of things for white people to have one counter and black people to have another counter? Duh. You're trying to upset the natural order of
Yeah,
things.
maybe stop doing that because then maybe I'm a accountant by trade in the 1940s named Oil Can or something, and now I don't have a roster spot because Jackie Robinson hit 4 home runs in a game, and now I'm back to balancing checkbooks.
Oil can is back to the minor
Yeah,
leagues.
this sucks.
Enjoy Rochester.
Yeah,
Oil can.
yeah. Now I'm playing for the Toledo Mud Pigs, and I hate it. So,
Oh God, there was where I went to college in Pennsylvania. There was a minor league affiliate that was, I think it was the Hogs or something, and they literally had bacon.
I think it's the Lehigh Valley Iron Pigs.
Iron Pigs.
Yeah.
Yes, I still
some
sleep
merch?
in a big Iron Pigs
Let's go.
T-shirt that I got
I love that.
from an
I
ex-boyfriend
love minor league baseball regalia.
with a big strip of bacon on it, and I was like,
Pigs.
yeah,
Let's
no.
go Pigs.
Yeah, yeah.
But the other
Anyway,
thing,
go
but the
on,
other thing I was going to say about the irony of this all is that this goes in a number of different directions because in certain conservative politicians, certain conservative commentators, there's all this thing about like the authoritarian nature of Xi's China, Putin's Russia, like what the reason why we were in Afghanistan was to protect the women of Afghanistan, to educate them, to make it so that they had a better future, that they weren't attacked and immiserated and taken over and marginalized by the Taliban, which, don't get me wrong, all of these concerns completely legitimate. The people who are parroting these concerns they are not the ones who are legitimate because, frankly, whether they like it or not, or whatever opinions they might say that they have, who they are standing with right now, or when they were peddling this lie, they're standing with the more retrograde government of Algeria
Yeah.
than they are with women of this world.
Oh, of course, but they would be the same people that say that like the pink-haired liberals in the United States are hypocrites for siding with the people of Gaza being genocided.
And if anything,
because they hate gays.
and right, and that's the other thing is for some reason it's okay to find common cause with retrograde governments who can advance their political agenda by saying this woman is not a woman. And therefore, this is Kamala Harris's America. When this is a microcosm of Kamala Harris's America in a boxing ring with an Algerian boxer against an Italian boxer in a world competition in Paris. But somehow
that's as American as it gets.
But somehow Kamala Harris, I guess, let this slide. So for all of this to be used as a cudgel in our electoral politics. But for some reason, having common cause with people who, regardless of what they may believe or think, are being brutalized and murdered en masse, by an ally of ours with our discretion and with our weapons and with our financial largesse. That means we're backwards because we're supporting people that might not think that what we think. You're supporting someone who you're saying you don't believe what they think, but you absolutely do.
You do. And by the way, we do because the reason that there is not democracy in many parts of the Middle East is because of stated U.S. and previously British and other imperialist policies where they carved up this oil-rich region and upheld a lot of despots and anti-democratic principles in order to get what they wanted for capitalism. So the reality is that we're a bunch of hypocrites if we really care about human rights domestically in some of these countries, and do absolutely nothing except actually create negative outcomes to bring them about.
The borders of these countries and these so-called, the countries that make up all of the other autocracies and dictatorships and all these things that every other country except Israel is not a democracy in the Middle East. The borders of these countries and their culture that have nothing essentially to do with their cultural histories because they were carved up by people who didn't live there. Those are as real as these gender conformities that white American conservatives say is what constitutes science as much as these borders constitute, world geography.
Yep. I just opened my computer to go to a different tab. It accidentally opened Twitter, and first thing in my feed is a baby, a completely lifeless baby in Gaza. Probably 2 months old. face as white as a sheet because there's no blood left. So,
But we are hypocrites because some people in that area of the world might be homophobic.
the good thing we solved it here.
I was going to say, good thing there are no homophobic Americans, for sure.
Anyway, we have another Olympic story, and then we will get to the NFL. So what the hell is happening with Jordan Chiles? The Olympics have requested that Jordan Chiles, the gymnast, returned the bronze medal that she got from the floor exercise. That was when Simone Biles actually got silver, and a Brazilian gymnast, Rebecca Andrade, I believe is how you say her last name, was the recipient of the gold medal. And it was the first all-black podium in Olympic gymnastics history. All three of the medalists were black people, and they shared a podium and had this incredibly sweet photo where Simone Biles and Jordan Chiles, excuse me, got on their knee and were praising the gold medalists from Brazil, and it was a beautiful moment. And it's just a bit of an odd situation because retroactively the Court of Arbitration for Sport, which I guess has jurisdiction here, has, I forget which body it is. I'm sorry, I wrote it down a little bit confusingly. But one of the bodies that's responsible for this is attempting to overturn her victory for the gold medal. And they're saying that there was an error in scoring. And the United States says, well, we have counter evidence. But apparently there was an issue in scoring where Chiles was upped by 1/10 of a point. So without that upping, she would have been in 5th place, not 3rd place. And what this committee is arguing is that the bronze should be going to Ana Barbosu of Romania, who had 4th place. So this would move her down from 3rd to 5th, and the 4th place winner, because of this scoring error, in theory, would get the bronze. Now, this is odd to me because, first of all, this is a really subjective sport, and there's subjectivity in a lot of this, but it's not about, the 100-meter sprint is pretty much as objective as it gets, right? 400-meter sprint, 200-meter sprint, or whatever. All those track, the racing and swimming, there's some subjectivity there. If you make an illegal turn, you can get disqualified. We saw some of that as well. But for the most part, you know who won the race. For gymnastics, it's about how the judges score things. And we saw that there's a lot of subjectivity in this. This was explored through the movie I, Tonya, and in other, conversations with Tonya Harding and the way she was treated versus Nancy Kerrigan. Now, this does not legitimize that brutal attack, obviously, on Nancy Kerrigan. But you just see how I think people who have less money, or people who may not be of the skin color of many of the judges, or there may be some covert racism there, they bear the brunt of that subjectivity oftentimes. So, scoring errors happen, refereeing errors happen, things get missed. The Knicks were the beneficiaries of this in the last NBA playoffs, where the refs all came out after that incredible win at the end and said, yeah, well, we missed some fouls on the Knicks and that we should have called it for the Sixers. That would have changed that game, and the Sixers would have won. And then who knows how that series would have gone. And so, but the refs in the NBA didn't come back and say, hey, we're going to change the outcome of this Knicks game because we have an update in the way, we looked at the tape again and we realized, oh crap, we should have done it this way. So I just really disagree with this. I think that the people who are saying that there could be some biases at play are probably right about that. I don't have a ton of information, again, about gymnastics, but I do know that these are very entrenched institutions that are quite old. And yeah, I can't understand why they would decide to do this. It seems quite cruel.
Yeah, I just think I do think it's just hard, no matter what, to like rescind, like, barring like a doping investigation or something like
Yeah.
that, or something where like clear evidence of like nefarious or malicious intent, or like actual like performance enhancement, where things are vacated or medals returned. It just seems very difficult for me to understand how something could clear this threshold so quickly to then make it so that an athlete who was by all accounts, by the letters of these rules prior to this decision, won this medal, to then not only have to return it but then like declare it for somebody else. It's just, I have no idea what the internal politics are like at some of these bodies, and I have no idea like, kind of either the racial, or what I mean by that is like any of like this sort of socio or geopolitical elements or wrinkles of this. I'm just like not very familiar with. It just seems like a really somewhat like rash action to take, when seemingly there are enough points of evidence to make it seem as if it's not necessarily conclusive enough to establish that this was a violation great enough to warrant someone losing a podium reaching medal after the fact.
It's not even a violation. It's they messed up.
That's
messed up, so you
right.
guys own it.
I mean, the thing is like to also sort of acknowledge or kind of try and rectify a mistake by the body by then impacting somebody else
in an inherently subjective system.
Right, in something where it's not as if it's completely tangible entirely, or like the rubric isn't so set in stone that it's like it's not an on or off switch when it comes to like good bad with gymnastics, right? It's not, and so
like remember that Saints Vikings playoff game where they missed a brazen pass interference, right?
Yes,
and I think the
right.
Vikings ended up winning that game.
But it would be analogous to me in a way. Obviously, it's a win or a loss is different, obviously, from like a bronze medal necessarily, just because there's more like there's more outcomes than just winning or losing when there's three options to receive a medal in the Olympics. But as you're saying, it's like, what if the refs were like, oh yeah, we made a mistake. The Vikings win now.
Yeah, and they wouldn't do that retroactively.
Actually, the Vikings won.
Because the reality is like, I'm sure a lot of gymnasts could submit evidence to this committee and be like, oh, they incorrectly scored me on this. They gave me two.
Yeah, it could probably the appeals could get opened up significantly, where it becomes sort of like, where that type of kind of appeals process or litigation process could become so onerous in its own right that this could open up something potentially that would make these people's jobs who made this mistake in the beginning, make it even more difficult because of how it's been handled so far.
Right, exactly. So, yeah, not cool. We'll see how this ends up getting resolved, but as of right now, it seems quite fishy. Now let's just turn to the NFL. We hinted at it at the beginning. We had our first preseason games in the NFL. I guess we'll start, though, with some of the news, and then we'll get to some preseason notes. We'll start with the Cowboys here, Bradley, and then let's get to the Jets. So the Cowboys, I've been laughing about how poorly they've been run for quite a while. Again, they haven't been to an NFC championship game in the second longest time, or are they tied with the Washington franchise for that period of time? I think that they're tied because the Lions ended up breaking out of that slump this past year in terms of NFC championship game appearances. And yet the Cowboys are still the most valuable franchise in the entire NFL. And that's because they have a brand that has transcended that lack of success, and they have a lot of regular season success and then seem to fall apart. I mean, like the Toronto Maple Leafs examples are pretty apt. But I would say that it's in part due to a lack of ability to change with the times. The Dallas Cowboys in their era of dominance, which really was at this point over 20 years ago, in the Jimmy Johnson era and all of that, was mostly a pre-salary cap time, if I'm not mistaken. It was the Cowboys being able to buy up all the talent, being able to spend. And then once the playing ground got a little bit more even and Jerry wanted to hoard onto his money for, I don't know, whatever nonsense he needs to do. He needs to buy another yacht, or he needs to do another AI hologram of him in the Dallas Cowboys Stadium.
Sponsored by Bank of America.
How he'd run the team. Yeah, right. He has basically tried to play hardball. It's almost like he gets off on this with his players in negotiations because he's so, as the owner and general manager of the team, he's so intimately involved. He gets like personal about the money that he's paying to these guys, where in reality, a functioning organization would just have a pot of money in the salary cap that they allocate to those players, and they don't try to hoard it or worry about like what comes off on the back end with a signing bonus or all the other goodies. They just take care of it, and they draft and they have a plan. There are two problems with the way that the Cowboys approach their business. One is that they don't treat their players right in the negotiations. They often, I mean, right now with the CeeDee Lamb situation, let's just pop this up here. Jerry Jones talking about CeeDee Lamb and his contract. Quote, "I don't have any urgency to get it done." And CeeDee responds, LOL. I mean, can you imagine saying that publicly? About one of your guys, about your star wide receiver? And I don't think CeeDee Lamb is in the class of Jamar Chase or Justin Jefferson or Tyreek Hill or,
But he had like
Devontae Adams a few years ago.
But
right?
he had, I would say, especially last season, like in a near, like I would say, like all pro, like second team all pro type season where he was like
from a production standpoint.
Yeah.
But that brings me to my second point.
Right.
They're too cheap. They don't treat their players well. But the second point is they don't build their team in a way that allows them to treat their players well, because
they're reliant on so few. Like the depth makes it so that they're reliant on so few
on
players.
their stars,
Right? Stars,
and I
exactly.
really think that this is a conscious decision by Jerry. He wants to sell jerseys. I want Micah, Dak, and CeeDee jerseys off the shelves, and so he makes him basically the only receiver on the roster last year, and they fed him an insane amount. He had a career year last year. And now he wants to get paid. I mean, so does Brandon Ayuk. It's a similar situation over there in San Francisco. Although I would say CeeDee's a more talented player. But he wants to get paid, obviously. I look at this production. But I don't think the production actually means he should not be getting paid more than Justin Jefferson. But he had that kind of year where you could say, I'm up there. I don't think he is. But why was he put in a position to have that kind of production?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Why was he put in a position to have that kind of production? Because the Cowboys were too cheap and not good at building a team around him where they had a complementary receiving core, and he got like an insane share of the targets during that time last year, during the season. And so he's looking to be paid commensurately. But the Cowboys now, so they've hitched their wagon to just a few star players as opposed to diversifying the talent across their team to the point where he can now demand the lion's share of that money in the salary cap because of the production that he engendered.
Well, the same issue with to varying degrees is going to happen with Dak Prescott and Micah Parsons.
Well, Micah's doing them a favor, and he says we can do contract negotiations next year, which he probably thinks I'm gonna have another freaking amazing year,
right?
And I'm gonna be the highest paid player on the defensive side.
I was gonna say if I'm the best defensive player in the year, best defensive player of the year this season, like he could have, which you could have made a case for last year, and if it happens again,
I thought he should have been or could have been up there.
If it happens again this year, which is again very likely, just knowing how excellent of a player he is, you know for sure that this guy is going to go up and say there is no way I am staying in this jersey if I'm making less money than Nick Bosa.
Yeah.
Or making less money than Myles Garrett. And that's it.
That's it.
And anybody who says that Jerry Jones, I love all of this narrativizing from some of the NFL press of being like, there's nothing that Jerry Jones wants more than to be in contention and make it back to a Super Bowl. Anyone who's saying that has a bridge to sell you. It is complete bullshit.
Yep.
He does not care about winning. If he cared about winning, he would not be making the moves and the decisions that he is making. What he cares about is making money, putting asses in seats, and maintaining his stranglehold as one of the few actual power brokers in the owners' rooms.
And
in the owners' meetings.
In the owners' meetings. And the other thing is that, like, I'm looking. So Dak Prescott agreed to a 4-year, $160 million contract. Again, it's only $126 million guaranteed. But this is the cap hits for him. 2021 first year of that contract, $17.2 million. 2022, $19.7. 2023, $26.8. This year, you want to guess what his cap number is? $55 million. $55 million. So they backloaded his deal. In essence, so that because they wanted to save on the front end. But now he has all the leverage because that $55 million could be, if he were to get extended throughout the rest of the contract, and they could have wiggle room as opposed to having to pay the entire lump sum in the final year of his deal before he, by the way, could just hit free agency after they pay him that money and then leave them behind and go to another team, which I think, they're banking that he won't because the Cowboys are so lucrative. But the reality is like, maybe Dak Prescott actually wants to win. But the fact that he has a $55 million cap hit isn't inhibiting them now from doing those other deals. So they gave a bad deal to Dak because, by the way, if you guys recall those contract negotiations, those were insanely protracted at the time because they waited too long. Then they gave him a deal where all the money is on the back end at the end of the deal where he has all of the leverage because he's the one who could decide on a new deal where that money is spread out to give them flexibility to re-sign Micah, to re-sign CeeDee Lamb. But they're, I don't even see that they're even negotiating with Dak Prescott. They might just let him walk to free agency and think like, hey, but we're the Cowboys. He's going to want to come back here. I don't know about that.
But I think that's a lot of kind of the strategery when it comes to Jerry Jones. It's kind of just sort of banking on the vestigial, residual impact of the Cowboys as a brand and a trademark.
But that could collapse real quick.
Of course, but also I almost anticipate it just because the era of Emmitt Smith and Troy Aikman, and even going further back with Roger Staubach or whoever, it's over, and it's been over for a long time.
Yep.
I'm even enveloping Tony Romo in that because they didn't accomplish anything.
Yeah. Those were fun years, but once again, like the Giants punched them in the mouth at home and went on to win the Super Bowl that year in that series against Tony Romo. Or not series, but you know what I mean. In that playoff game against Tony Romo, I think it was the divisional game. So, yeah, like they just have an outdated philosophy that honestly, in my view, hinges on Jerry Jones like having kind of disrespect for the players that play under him. He wants to be the kingmaker. I think he's an old school racist that wants to be able to gets off on dominance because he goes. The legend is that he goes directly to the players and tries to negotiate with them directly, as opposed to going through their agents, which is like, I think in the CBA, you're not supposed to be circumventing the agent if the player has representation to go and try to strong arm them. But that's who this guy is. He is inherently just like an old Republican crotchety businessman. And just because he's kind of funny and good media, we should learn this from Donald Trump, doesn't mean that he's engaging in these negotiations in any way that makes sense for himself, let alone for the team. So if I were a Cowboys fan, I'd be outraged by this because the other thing is that CeeDee Lamb is not going to be ready for week 1. We've seen this. Like Josh Jacobs holding out last year for the Raiders. He had his worst year statistically as a professional. And it probably harmed his long-term earning potential. I think he signed just a 1-year deal with the Packers, if I'm not mistaken. 1 year, $8 million? Either way, he didn't have a very good year, and it harmed his earning potential. Because 4 years, $48 million. It's just not a lot guaranteed, if I'm not mistaken. It was Aaron Jones who signed the 1 year, $8 million deal. Yes,
with Minnesota.
So it's a $48 million deal
For
with
Jacobs.
but with only 12.5 million guaranteed at signing.
Right, so it's heavily incentive laden.
Heavily
Yeah.
incentive laden. And so the problem is, it's just like that Jacobs was slow last year because he didn't have that camp, because he was holding out. Makes total sense. Running backs, that made sense for him, but it seemed like, that regime of of McDaniels and company were not going to be interested in re-signing him regardless. So it's not exactly analogous, but he didn't have the best year because of that reason. And so CeeDee Lamb, that could be the case here. And that's why I have the first overall pick in one of my fantasy leagues. I'm not taking CeeDee Lamb, even though I think he's wide receiver 1 in a lot of rankings because of that very reason. So I think the Cowboys might collapse this year. We haven't had a repeat NFC East championship. It looked like the Eagles were going to be the first back-to-back winner in quite some time, around 20 years. It looked like they were going to do that. But then they had that late season collapse where they went 1-5 and lost to the Arizona Cardinals and lost the division. And then the Cowboys ended up winning. So I think it's the Eagles' division to lose this year. Just a little bit of a preview before we do, our NFL predictions podcast, which should be coming up very soon. That'll be quite fun. In terms of the Brandon Ayuk thing, I don't really know what the 49ers are doing. It seems like this is a John Lynch playbook where he takes up the negotiations and threatens to trade. I mean, the Deebo Samuel situation seemed like he was getting traded for months and months before they finally came to an agreement. But Brandon Ayuk also, it's not going to be the same. He's holding in. He's not practicing. The Steelers seem like the only option at this point. I don't know. I don't know what to make of it.
The reporting was basically that it's at the most recent reporting or notifications that I was seeing was that his decision was boiling down to returning to the Niners or going to Pittsburgh, which is interesting to me, just to think of how obviously disgruntled he has presented himself, and how seemingly for the last few weeks or even a few months has indicated that he basically almost under no circumstances wanted to play for the Niners, but now is saying basically maybe if they were able to actually agree to terms, he'd go back or go to Pittsburgh.
Yeah, I think he's going to end up going back because this is the same playbook that the Niners used with Deebo Samuel in their contract negotiations, and it was like he acted like he was already gone. So I mean, guess this is the problem that the 49ers have. They have too many really good players that they want to pay. But Trent Williams is also holding out for a little bit more for his contract, and that makes sense. He's kind of towards the end of his career. We shall see what happens. I don't have too much of a take on that front, except to say that, I don't know, the 49ers, they don't have a problem playing hardball with their players, and it is a miracle that John Lynch has survived all of this with that Trey Lance pick. Trey Lance had a scramble, but do you see that pick he threw in that Cowboys preseason game?
I wasn't watching.
Oh gosh,
it was not good. It was not.
I have no life.
It didn't inspire confidence.
It did not inspire confidence. I was trying to tune in because that was supposedly Brady's, I think, debut as a broadcaster, but then it was a different broadcast for NFL Network because it was only local. Bullshit.
Yeah. All right.
So, the other, obviously, let's now talk about the Jets, and then we'll talk about the preseason quarterbacks. So Hassan Reddick, pass rusher, has requested a trade from the Jets. Now, you might be thinking, Hassan Reddick's on the Jets? Right. Well, he hasn't played a snap yet. The Jets traded for him months ago. He was acquired from the Eagles for a conditional third-round pick back in March. And they have not come to an agreement on a contract extension. And so Hassan Reddick has requested a trade from the Jets. And I'm just in awe of this situation. This is the statement that the Jets put out in response, which was astonishing to me. We have informed Hassan that we will not trade him, that he is expected to be here with his teammates, and that he will continue to be fined per the CBA if he does not report. Since the trade discussions back in March, we have been clear, direct, and consistent with our position. Our focus will remain on the guys we have here as we prepare for the regular season. GM Joe Douglas put out that statement. Between this and the Aaron Rodgers situation, what do the Jets think that they're accomplishing by admonishing their players in public, like aggressively so.
Well, it wouldn't really be a Jets.
No, go ahead.
Oh, so it wouldn't be really Jets. It wouldn't be a real Jets off season if it wasn't for like 1 to 2 disgruntled players who were holding out, and also it's not just the holding out. It's also like this public flaying for all to see, and without any sort of like discretion or like respect for the players that are on this team. I know he hasn't played a snap officially for the Jets yet, but it's like I don't understand what type of message this is supposed to be sending to a new addition to the team when, sure, obviously it might be somewhat grating or frustrating that he already wants to request a trade. At the same time, what message are you sending to other prospective free agents that you were respecting these guys or honoring their wishes when you were airing this stuff out so publicly?
He is requesting a trade because he hasn't gotten a contract extension and he doesn't want to play on the final year of a deal when he's, 31 years old? Right. 30, I guess he's 29 years old.
He'll be 30 in September.
He'll be 30 in September, okay. I thought he was a little older, but still. He will be 30 in September, and he wants some longer-term assurance, and they have been unable to come to an agreement. Now, that would make sense. Like, the Eagles and Hassan Reddick were unable to come to an agreement. That's why the Eagles traded him to the Jets. And the Jets are supposed to have a contract framework in place before they pull a trigger on a trade like this for a third-round pick, which is not something to turn your nose up at. That is astonishing to me. How do you make a trade without actually understanding, like, okay, this is what his agent wants. This is what Hassan Reddick is saying that he wants. We're able to pay that, give or take, like $1 million or $2 million or whatever. You should know exactly what the contract will look like, at least the broad framework of it, before you pull the trigger on this. This is incredible, like, front office mismanagement. Just needless antagonizing of a player by saying, we'll keep fining you, you son of a bitch, until you show up and play on the final year of your deal, which is too cheap for your services based on his record as a sack artist in the NFL. And like, we were as critical as anybody about Aaron Rodgers going off on that stupid retreat when he should have been at mandatory minicamp. But then they come out in public and say that the absence is unexcused. And there's a fly here. The absence. Oh gosh, I'm like Mike Pence. The absence is, and that's because I'm talking about Aaron Rodgers. They're the demons are trying to tell me a sign. Like okay. The fact that he was allowed to go on that trip says something bad about where the organization is at. But if he goes on that trip, then you cover for your player in public. That's the other thing too. Is like it's also just even in a suboptimal circumstance, it's like make it do no harm. Make it the least impactful response possible. And they just dragged it out and we're like, we don't know where he is. I mean, functioning organizations, like, so the 49ers are probably just, like, so angry at Brandon Ayuk right now, right? They think, you want to get paid too much. You think they're going to put out a statement saying he will be fined?
Yes. Exactly. Like this Joe Douglas statement. Can you imagine John Lynch coming out and saying, we're not going to trade him, and he needs, and until then, we're focusing on other players, and he needs to get his ass back here, essentially.
And we're going to fine him. I mean, unbelievable.
Because even if you're frustrated, even if those frustrations are real and the disagreement and the discord is real, in a league that perception is reality is an axiom that describes every outcome of the business end of the NFL, as well as the idea of not putting your trash out for everyone to smell and everyone to notice the stink. The Jets are essentially the proverbial version of like a very smelly dumpster.
And all of the other organizations seem to understand, okay, players are going to drive a hard bargain because this is they have 1 or 2 shots to get generational wealth or just like some money for a lot of players in the NFL. They have one or 2 bites of the apple to get what they need to set up their family, and often it's their extended family for long periods of time to make sure that, their family will always be comfortable and that they have this one opportunity and all the owners own all the equity. They don't just get 50% of whatever. They also own all the equity. So the value of their purchase of the team keeps going up and up and up. So this is what seems like just like a Woody Johnson thing to me. You show that guy, he's a worker for me. He gets his ass back in the facility or we keep fining him because that's more money for me. And that's the thing where I'm like, this is bad for the Jets in the way that like players are going to look at this. They're going to say, how do I know if I come to the Jets, they're going to deal with me in good faith with my contract negotiations? And we come back to, some of the issues with how the Jets have constructed their team to a degree too, as well, where it's like Joe Douglas has found a lot of talent, but do I think that they have found like a cohesive way to build their team? I don't know if that's the case.
But I think that's I think my biggest issue with this is that, and the thing is, this has happened, and I can think off the top of my head of a number of different times where this has happened. The context might be slightly different, but the same thing is always the Jets airing out their dirty laundry and making players disgruntled. Elijah Moore demanded a trade because he wasn't happy with the direction of the team and him basically not having any connection with Zach Wilson, which again, it might be on Zach Wilson, but is also on the team to not scheme up for the guy that they drafted early in the second round. He got traded to the Browns because he wasn't happy there. Mekhi Becton, they did not, as much as I think his conditioning may have been an issue for Mekhi Becton, that's also on the team to make sure the guy you drafted early in the first round in 2020 is in shape to play.
I mean, I'm sorry.
And Zach Wilson.
They ruined Zach Wilson's career. They could have made... Okay.
They ruined his career.
You think that if Kyle Shanahan had Zach Wilson, like, fresh out of college, you think he would have been the player that he is today? You think that if Sean Payton had Zach Wilson right out of college before this, his confidence was shattered, now he has him, right? But it's a different situation. Like,
even if he
was 21,
but even if he did not pan out,
yes,
the way that he would not have panned out would not have been so calamitous to make it so that for 2 seasons in a row, the second season, not by his choice, because he was not anticipating Aaron Rodgers lasting 4 snaps before being out for the season, he became a national laughingstock. And
they let it happen.
And they did nothing to protect that guy's image or protect, which might seem silly, but when you're in the employ of an NFL team, that's kind of part of the job of the employer to sort of protect the guys who are in that locker room, no matter who they are, no matter whether you like them or not, because it reflects poorly on the team.
And it creates
makes
bad
you look
team morale.
unprofessional.
Yes.
It makes you look like shit.
I know. So that's why I always defended Zach Wilson, even when it was hard to, because I did see the talent that he had as a thrower. He had talent as a thrower, and I think any competent coaching staff would have at least, or organization, would have made him not, he might have failed still, probably would have, but not in the way that he failed in New York.
Not in a way where it was not just, let's everyone point and laugh at this guy. Let's point and laugh while his team does nothing about it.
Right. In fact, exacerbates the situation. So I hope this gets resolved because I have no idea how the AFC East is going to shake out this year. I mean, the Miami Dolphins are apparently not even the betting favorites. But
I mean, I could see. I'm sure we'll get into this as we get a little closer.
Yeah.
But I do think I could see the Bills with this new configuration actually looking pretty good. I honestly thought
reports out of camp are a little concerning to me. But yeah, I mean, just because it seems
about the offense.
Yeah, I don't know what the receivers are going to look like in terms of a snap count.
And I mean, some of it's a little bit of projection in the sense of you're going to have to rely more on Khalil Shakir, which is a bit of a tall order for a guy to go fifth. He's good. I just think it's a lot to ask of him so early in his career. And then same goes for Curtis Samuel. I mean, Curtis Samuel's a bit of a projection because he never really panned out in Washington, but I don't think that means he can't. I just think it means can you access what he has? And then Keon Coleman. I mean, Keon Coleman's an early second round pick. I really liked him in college, but it's also, again, we're also projecting a rookie wide receiver as being a focal point of this offense. But
he led in the snap count in the preseason. Then
Coleman did.
Coleman did with 9 snaps. But he had 0 targets. Khalil Shakir had 1 target. Had 5 snaps. I mean, Marquez Valdez-Scantling had 4 snaps, ran 2 routes, 0 targets, that kind of deal. I think they're going to
Right,
have to be a
MVS
lot.
is there.
Yeah, I think they're going to have to be a lot more reliant on Kincaid and Knox and James Cook, and like go too heavy with like bring out 2 tight ends, threat of the run, and blocking with those guys
And-
every single time, and then have Josh Allen run the ball.
But I mean, with Kincaid, I mean, that's sort of also the reason you drafted that guy in the first round
Totally.
is to sort of have him kind of be a focal point of the offense and run routes and sort of not obviously be Travis Kelce. That's not fair to put on him, but to literally like kind of have a guy who's more of a move tight end. You're not really letting him block. Maybe he'll do a chip block and go out on a number of routes with his speed and athleticism. So I think also, as much as, of course, so much of the success of this team relies on Josh Allen, I think Kincaid will be a really, really big, has to be a really big X factor for them to be successful on offense. But also, Joe Brady.
Yep.
Oh, Joe Brady, Joe Barry. I always get them confused. Joe Brady. We also, I think, I just want to see a continuation of not only just like kind of actualizing these guys that Allen has as support, but the run game's got to be an actual threat.
Totally.
Because Allen's pass game and even him as a designed run guy weakens a little bit when they're not really like, oh, if they're going to run the ball, it's going to be Josh running the ball. So just look out for that. It can't be that. Like, it cannot be that. It has to be like a real package and a real menu for James Cook.
Zach Wilson, did you know he was 10 for 13 for 117 passing yards in the preseason game? Look, he was far down the depth chart, but
Oh my God!
look, Sean Payton could fix that guy. I mean,
I think there's a real difference between being put in legitimately the worst possible position in that of 32 teams and then going to one that's not the worst possible position.
yep. Yeah, we shall see. Good for Zach. At least he's close back to home in Utah.
See what his friends' moms are up to.
Yeah. So some more preseason notes. I just want to talk about the quarterbacks, really. I haven't been able to do a deeper dive, but Caleb Williams looks like a franchise quarterback, like immediately top 10 quarterback, I'm not even joking. He looks insane.
So a few of these throws were awesome. The little dump off to DeAndre Swift and the pass to Cole Kmet as well. Both were like.
One was when he was drifting out of the pocket
Yes,
to the right sideline, where it came across
moving.
back to his body.
Yeah, right.
To the receiver. He across his body to the left.
To quote, speaking of Tony Romo, it's a little homie.
He's a little homie. Like, I don't know how to.
Oh, Jim!
Oh my God! We're gonna have some of that with the Chicago Bears this year, because this guy, look, he's everything we were saying leading up to this. I mean,
no, he's and even in I was seeing Nate Tice, who is at Yahoo Sports now, formerly of The Athletic. I saw him clip something from the game in that dump off. I'm pretty sure, like, you also see him like making pre-snap adjustments at the line. Like he's doing beyond
Justin Fields
like
was not really
like
doing.
motioning Adunze across the formation from just looking at the formation. Like he's
mentally,
it's good to see him. Yeah, it's good to see. It's not just call for the ball, throw a cannon, throw a rocket. It's like he's also processing the game.
Yeah,
which is huge to see.
I think we're talking about the youth movement for these next guys up for quarterbacks, and it's incredible because that 2020 draft class was so heralded with Trevor Lawrence,
and it was
or maybe 21, I forget, but
21. It was Lawrence, Zach Wilson,
Trey Lance,
which
I hated that pick at the time and was right about that.
There's one more, right? It was
no, there was 5. It was Trey Lance, then it was Mac Jones.
Oh, Mac Jones,
who's now
right, Mac,
the backup
yeah.
to Trevor Lawrence,
Right.
and Justin Fields,
right,
who is now on Pittsburgh. So there's only one guy that's still on their team, and I would take these new guys from the youth movement, Caleb Williams and C.J. Stroud, over Trevor Lawrence. Like.
No, because
phenomenal.
Because in a similar way to Justin Herbert, we know the talent that these guys have, but we have not seen it. We have not seen them reach their ceiling.
Yeah.
We've sort of seen them almost be beset by this type of analysis paralysis of like feeling the need to really stay in this mold, which is not benefiting them.
Yeah,
you're not seeing like the ambition required, I think, from either Herbert or Lawrence to be a quarterback like Josh Allen or Patrick Mahomes or Joe Burrow at his best. Like, I think that's the difference.
I think that's a good point.
And I think potentially with Williams, we might already be seeing that spontaneity.
Yes. Well, I saw him being interviewed in the pre-draft process. He's a psycho. He's been working on like the technicalities of his motion for 2 years, like in the way that he would be if he were a third-year pro.
He's definitely and he's cerebral, but I don't think in a way that will hurt him. I think it's just he's very he takes his
Crap,
work
seriously.
very, very seriously.
Yeah, no, the Bears are going to be, I think, I don't want to give away what I think, but I think the Bears could definitely be in the playoffs this year. 100%.
And as we've discussed, because we were watching the Giants iteration of Hard Knocks, like Odunze and Williams, it was already documented that they forged a relationship kind of in the pre-draft process. And Odunze himself, I think, is wise beyond his years and a very mature presence and a really, really smart player to begin with. So to have that there at the youth level with Odunze, then sort of have kind of the prototype of the Odunze type in Keenan Allen, as well as the X factor in DJ Moore. It's just
I love Cole Kmet, but apparently Gerald Everett is taking the starting snaps at this point. But if Cole Kmet's your tight end too,
but to have tight end depth, which they didn't before, Kmet was sort of the only guy they were really having on offer there. It is, to me, a real transformation already. Of course, this is on paper. We're seeing a little bit with preseason. Live reps, live bullets, whatever you want to call it, when it gets to the actual regular season action, anything can happen. But they have put themselves in a real position to succeed.
The NFC North is going to be a bloodbath. A bloodbath. I can't think of a bad team in the NFC North. All four of those teams are good teams.
And I'm excited.
Coaches.
And I'm excited to see all of kind of the
Eberflus okay, but all four good teams.
But I'm excited sort of to see all of the evolution that we've seen, which is like with the Bears, as you're saying. How will the offense look under Shane Waldron now that Caleb Williams is there, and now that this offense is fully functional, makes total sense, has like pieces basically everywhere you look. Kind of see how the offensive line again takes a step in the next year. Darnell Wright, these guys, they see how Tevin Jenkins, see how these guys manifest in this next year. The Lions, same thing. Can they build upon a conference finals appearance?
Yeah.
The Packers, with not only newly signed Jordan Love and the next iteration of the youth invasion in Green Bay on the skill position side in the offense, but also a defense that I think has a chance to really break out.
And they changed the coordinator
to kind of get out of the Joe Barry kind of like stagnant sort of like this is what we're showing and that's what we're doing. Like
and they weren't
it.
necessarily getting the most out of their talent. And then
which they have
Brian Flores,
the Vikings.
On the Vikings on that side of the ball,
coaching those guys up, advancing them even beyond maybe these more than the sum of their parts.
Yes, but they've had defensive improvements as well. They let go of Danielle Hunter, but they signed
Anders Van Ginkel, signed Jonathan Grenard, who is sort of in almost a swap from Houston to Minnesota.
Yes, that's what I was thinking of.
But Grenard on a per snap basis, despite not being as heralded or as much of like a blue chip prospect, so to speak, was very, very effective down in and down out. And Van Ginkel is like sort of the joker piece that's kind of vital to a Brian Flores defense. Kind of this like sort of like undersized blitz option who can also drop into coverage.
Bernard is younger and cheaper.
Yes. Right? So exactly. Than Hunter, 100%.
And I think Danielle Hunter was sick of the Vikings because he felt like cheaped out by them rightly so for quite a while. So I don't know how that division is going to shake out.
No, it'll be really interesting.
I don't think the Lions are a shoo-in to win it again at all, and they're very talented as well. But like to bring back to the preseason, the other quarterback I think a lot of people were really impressed by was JJ McCarthy.
Oh yeah, that
he had a bad interception and then he had two huge touchdowns.
Those two touchdown passes. There was one obviously that Justin Jefferson was like, "Oh my god!" Like he was going crazy for it. Like that was a nice throw. That was a really nice throw.
Look,
that's
I feel validated in loving JJ McCarthy and him being my third favorite quarter. Oh, god, I loved Penix too, but I really did like JJ McCarthy at the end of. I reevaluated. I think a lot of people put way too much on the system that was being run by Harbaugh up there in Michigan because it was so run heavy.
That's sort of my belief, where my belief stems from, is like I don't think it was a matter of like him not being able. I think it was a matter of how the offense was constructed.
It was absolutely that, because I think our eyes were open when we saw him at the combine, and he had maybe threw the hardest football of all of those top prospects, and he was able to just really, really put some athleticism behind it, and he's a sneaky good athlete.
And you
Like,
remember,
he
and you
can
remember,
run the football.
and you remember,
Better
I think,
athlete than Drake May.
and you remember, I think we were talking about that this one throw, I think it was either in the semis against the semi game or against Washington, where he's basically got a guy in his lap and he's getting tackled and he's almost like parallel to the ground, but he uncorks a throw that hits his guy, and I'm like, that's partially that kind of like that willingness to take the impact and get the throw off, but also for the throw to be somewhat accurate.
Yeah.
That's something you can't fully teach.
No, he has really a ton of athleticism, and he clearly, I just think, is a perfect fit for that offense. And he's a hard worker. He looks like Kevin O'Connell's much younger brother. It's perfect. The other guy that looked really good was Bo Nix, and I never saw it with Bo Nix. I didn't get the hype. I didn't get the vibe, but I'm a big fan of Chris Sims's podcast. I would say like that's probably my favorite go-to NFL podcast. And he had Bo Nix as his third quarterback in this draft, and I was like, what the hell is he talking about? I don't see this. I don't get it. Got it a little bit more when I saw him play for the Broncos because he just looks the part, and you see he can rip the football. I didn't think he made those same power throws at Oregon. I didn't see it in like my very cursory study of his game, but of course I just do this as a hobby, so who knows. But he looked really good, and he almost just looked so poised and already is a part of the Sean Payton machine on offense, which is exactly what Drew Brees was. I mean, he was just an extension of the coaching staff. And if Payton feels like Bo Nix can do that, I mean, I feel like he looked like much better than I thought he would.
I think Nix looked... The thing is, if you told me from watching Bo Nix at Auburn, I would have been like, him going in the first round is a mistake.
Yeah.
Because he had in my view, there was some promise to him at Auburn, but ultimately I was like, oh, he's not accurate. He's jumpy. Like there were a lot of issues mechanically, right, and kind of like just sort of what you both from eye test, but I think also just kind of like it didn't seem like he was like necessarily either what you want, obviously, from a high draft pick, which is sort of being scheme proof, but I almost didn't know if he could just work in a scheme period.
Yeah.
But going to Oregon, that very much changed. And the thing is, yes, he's an older quarterback, but if anything, the amount of tread on his tires makes it so that probably he's a little bit more ready to play just because he's played so much and at a high level for a long time. And even if his ceiling to me may not be as high as Caleb's or as Jaden Daniels, and I say Drake May just because he's like Drake May is the youngest quarterback out of this group, and he's played the least amount of football. Mm-hmm. So I think if any,
and J.D. McCarthy's pretty young too,
and McCarthy's 20. I think McCarthy's just 22. So when it comes to Nix, I think with the team that the Broncos have, it's actually probably better that they have a more pro-ready quarterback who they don't need to have to put place on such a learning curve so quickly.
And he just seems to have good processing, which I hadn't seen. He was able to process things at the line of scrimmage and make adjustments, and he made some really, really good throws, including one where he rolled out to his left as a right-armed quarterback and fired one to the left sideline, which is a really, really difficult throw, and completed it on 3rd and long.
And truly, for the Broncos too, honestly, getting any semblance of just more active, expeditious, and kind of focused quarterback play than they did from Russell Wilson is a victory in its own right.
Yes. Well, I don't know what the hell is happening with the Steelers, but that's what I'd say in terms of impressiveness of those guys, the highest drafted quarterback class in history.
This run of QBs that we saw that was almost like.
But I'm tiering it. I'm ranking it. I'm categorizing.
Oh yeah, no.
Williams won. I would say. I don't know how you'd feel. I would say.
Yeah, I think so.
In terms of impressiveness in the preseason, because I mean they barely played Jaden Daniels, but some of that looked really good.
You saw. I think what
I already knew that about Jaden.
But
Daniels.
you saw, I think, what was advertised, which is like. Yes, maybe he's like. I think a little knock for Daniels was like he's not as creative as a runner as like Lamar is, and also obviously different body type. Like the Lamar Jaden was never
an upright runner.
Was never a 1-to-1 comparison. But the thing is, he is insanely fast.
Well, he had
Like,
that rushing touchdown. Yeah.
and his arm, and he has a cannon. Like, he has
yeah.
a real arm. Like,
Yeah.
and
he
but
that ball. Okay, I'm adjusting.
I think maybe by a
Deami
hair.
Brown throw was a
I
phenomenal.
think it maybe was by a hair. Could be like Caleb, Jaden Daniels 2A, JJ 2B.
Yes.
Then the
Bo
rest.
Nix.
Then Nix. Then the rest.
And then I'm doing the rest because
Yeah.
okay, well, look, I don't know. It's just Penix looked good too. I mean, it just I in terms of my expectations, my JJ McCarthy and Bo Nix exceeded my expectations. Jaden Daniels met my expectations. Penix maybe was a little. I thought he might light it up more, so I'll put him down below. And then there's the Drake May of it all. He threw 3 passes, and one of them was like a wheel route, and he was taken out.
Well, I mean,
Why?
I mean, to be honest with you, I
Did you
would.
see Joe Milton?
Well, I have my position on Joe Milton is like I have had a
Drake May must hate Joe.
I've had a relationship with Joe Milton, and I don't mean that in a nasty
Sexual
way.
sense?
Yeah, I mean. Joe Milton is like Hendon Hooker before him, the classic Tennessee quarterback where I'm like, man, this guy throws the ball real far. And then I look, I'm like, okay, he doesn't know where the ball is going. That is the problem. And for some reason, every ball he throws, it goes 90 yards.
Right. It's because they have that extremely not pro style system.
Their
at
offense,
Tennessee.
their offense is 4 verts. That's what the offense is. It's just 4 guys run out there and see what happens.
Yeah, it's a Madden offense.
And no, exactly. It's literally what I would do. It's all Hail Marys all the time. That's exactly what I spam Hail Mary, even in the end zone, Hail Mary. But Milton, in my view, I almost think it would be potentially smart for the Patriots because of how bad the team is. If anything, I'd probably be like, maybe play Joe Milton.
Well,
and if he's better, great than his draft station. But I'm almost like, why put May out there with a?
But they're not. They're gonna play Jacoby Brissett. That's the thing.
If anything, or Brissett, the grizzled vet. Because I'm almost like, the line is bad. Their best wide receiver is Kendrick Bourne.
Yeah.
And the defense will be good, but that won't help Drake May. The offensive line is horrible.
Yeah, I know, but they made the choice to draft Drake May, right? And
they guess they could have drafted a more pro-ready guy for a bad team.
Yeah,
but
yeah.
I
I just didn't like the choice. Like, I'm worried about how this is gonna. It seems odd because if he's gonna be the primary backup, why would you play him for 2 series, like 3 passes?
Well, I wonder. I can't. It's always hard to read the tea leaves in preseason, but either there's nothing to read from that, or they're not really confident they want him taking reps yet.
Right. So or they're not. They don't want him exposing himself to the public or something like that. Like, were they playing politics with it, or was
that's right?
Or
right.
is he going to see more playing time in preseason game number 2?
Right.
That's the question.
It's interesting because it is somewhat inexplicable to me because the combination of how bad the roster is, and then taking who I would consider just by age and reps the rawest guy of those choices, just because like Drake May principally before like mid high school, I'm pretty sure maybe middle school or something, was a baseball player.
Yeah.
Like,
he kind of throws it like a baseball.
And I think of these guys besides JJ is the youngest guy of this group. So with this type of roster, it's like you're kind of if and I hate to say it because I of course don't wish this on anybody, but with this offensive line and this group of skill position players, you are putting, if you wanted to throw this guy out there, it would to me be like a dereliction of duty as a football team.
Yeah, and like if he's the primary backup, there's no chance that Jacoby Brissett stays healthy, or not no
behind
chance,
this offensive line.
There's a chance he probably doesn't stay healthy for all 17 games. I'm just gonna put that out there. They could be drafting first overall next year. And
the thing is, Jerod Mayo was obviously the heir apparent. He was the linebackers coach, but we don't really have any actual idea what he's going to be like as a head coach in terms of in-game decision making, like coaching up these guys on the offensive end. Alex Van Pelt, the guy who they chose as to be offensive coordinator, has never really been a particularly inspiring hire wherever he's gone. And I think the last time he was in the NFC East, I think it was for Washington, he got fired.
Yeah. All right. Well,
AFC East, excuse me. So it's a little inexplicable, the combo of if another team drafted Drake May, like with a better roster construction and more of an insurance policy, I'd be like, okay, but like both ends of this, the roster construction side and the draft side, it doesn't make any sense. Like,
no, it doesn't make much sense. But we'll see. We'll see. Maybe he comes back out for preseason game 2, and we figure it all out. But what last on this? What did you think of the kickoff? New kickoff. I kind of like it.
I didn't see it. I saw people posting that there was. Sorry, I didn't fully watch.
Oh, you weren't like indoors
watch
all
the
weekend
material,
watching preseason football.
Yeah,
You have a life.
I was in church. My
Oh.
nieces were getting baptized.
Oh wow, how wholesome. I like it. I think it adds new strategy to the game, so I'm a fan of it. Let's read
Great.
some IMs and then we'll get out of here. John Mass, the women's team got super lucky. Gabby Williams ripped them to shreds. She was phenomenal. Shawis, I think I see now why you guys think Jason Tatum is lame. Dude was bitching about minutes on Instagram literally after winning gold. What an ungrateful dork. Also, I don't normally like or care about the anthem, but her did an amazing job with the closing ceremony. Yes.
She rocks. She's awesome.
Rocks. John Nass also says, look up prioritization rules for the WNBA that makes it impossible for players to play in the French league and the W. The union needs to fix this. Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, there's similar rules in the NHL. Tater Tot, Bears have done well at trading for and signing star players this offseason with DJ Moore and Montez Sweat. They still need someone opposite Sweat. Ryan Poles incoming. Ryan Poles, look at this. Coming from Kansas City, and then he gets Caleb Williams. I mean, look at that. Dave from Jamaica, very jet-like things are happening. Floyd the Barber, it's funny the Cowboys still maintain the inflated sense of importance even though they haven't made the Super Bowl in almost 30 years. Yep. Tim Not Pool says, Oil can Boyd? Oil can Boyd?
Yeah, that's where I got the. That was the source of my oil can.
Damn
reference.
it. All right, gotcha. I didn't get that. All right, and the final I am here, folks. Niall from Trinidad. Emma and Bradley, I have always said that Jerry Jones is a snake oil salesman. Every year he has fans believe it is their year. Yep. All right, guys. We will see you on Monday. Thanks for watching. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.